Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Rybrary. I'm your librarian. No talking in the Rybrary and all of the other things that I say at the beginning of these videos. I'm not great at completing series. I tend to not even read more than one entry from a series in a row. This is largely because I just get burned out and bored by, reading the same thing for extended periods of time, with exceptions, but usually that's how I read. And I'm not, super concerned necessarily with getting to the end of a story unless it's, something really incredible. My, watermark in regards to a lot of things in fiction, but with regard to, how much I have to like something to want to like cruise through it all is A Song of Ice and Fire. As a result of that, I have a bunch of series that, I'm in the middle of, either, completed series or not completed series that I haven't caught up with. And about half of those series are fantasy series, which makes sense because fantasy seems to be more series oriented than a lot of the stuff that I read, like horror or sci-fi. Even there's more sci-fi series, but fantasy is very much series oriented. Part of the reason there's so many fantasy series is, like, as I was saying a minute ago, I'm always kind of chasing the dragon, so to speak. Yeah, chasing the dragon. I'm chasing the the dragon, so to speak, with trying to find something that is as good and as amazing, I guess I should say, since it's my favorite series ever, as A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm constantly looking for that. So today I thought I would just go through the 7 fantasy series that I currently have running. I'm going to say this now because I usually say it at the end, and it's probably smarter to say it now. But please, if you like the stuff that I put on the channel, liking and subscribing is a really nice thing to do. So feel free to do it. So I'll be showing, with the books here I'll be showing where possible the next entry in the series that I have yet to read. And if I don't have that, then I'll just show the one that I have read most recently. And with that, let's get right down to it with the first entry on the list here. A book series that I started about 10 years ago, and kind of is the series that made me realize that I'm not good at, reading series in a row. And I mean, maybe it wasn't the best series to try to do that with in the first place. But that's Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series, one of the most famous fantasy series ever. Yeah, about 10 years ago when I was in code school, I was talking to fellow students about, fantasy series and trying to find something that I love as much as Game of Thrones / Song of Ice and Fire. And this was, a big one that was recommended to me. I read The Eye of the World, the first one, and I liked it. Not nearly as much as Song of Ice and Fire, but I did really like it, and I was, absorbed in it. So I picked up the Great Hunt, the second one, and so on. And this one here is actually the 5th entry in the series, The Fires of Heaven. And I got about like 50 pages into this at the point at which I burned out, and I haven't gone back to the series since, though I do intend to at some point, in spite of the fact that it's been like 8 years or something. This is the series that is kind of considered the bridge between classic Tolkien worship fantasy and, what has come since then with more innovative fantasy stuff. This is a series about a world where magic is only safely usable by women, and that, whenever men have tried to use magic in the past, that it has had disastrous results, and that, the women magic users in this world work to kind of contain male magic users. And then the main character in this, Rand, is a magic user and is a powerful magic user, and there's a prophecy and all kinds of stuff. Like I said, it's in many ways very Tolkien-esque, but in many ways has really cool, innovative for the time magic stuff, and thematic stuff that you wouldn't have necessarily found in Tolkien or anything like that. Yeah, I don't know like when I want to get back to this exactly, because I as you'll see, there's a bunch of other stuff that I have that I'm juggling, but I do at some point want to get through this whole series of 14 books, 11 of which were written by Robert Jordan before he died, and the last 3 written by Brandon Sanderson, who is actually coming up here on this list. And here he is, Brandon Sanderson, Stormlight Archive. Brandon Sanderson, setting aside your J.K. Rowling's and your George R.R. Martin's and your J.R.R. Tolkien's, Brandon Sanderson is one of the most famous and well-known fantasy authors today. He's very prolific. He's written a lot of books, and his books are very long. Not all of them, but this series in particular is very long, which kind of made it a not necessarily the best choice to like dive into his work for that reason. Though I like it, but still, it's a chore to get through one of these things. This is Brandon Sanderson's, what he considers his magnum opus series. He's got a bunch of other well-known fantasy series like Mistborn, but this is the one that he considers to be his statement work, I guess, is what you could say. I like it. I don't love it. I like it, I obviously like it enough to keep reading it, but his prose is kind of weak. It's very, like plain, and not in a like artfully done way. He's concerned with, getting the stuff across and not, with having nice language necessarily. Also, you can see the size of this. Editing can be kind of an issue with him. Like there's like usually more than there needs to be in these books. But all the same, his world building is really cool. His magic systems are really cool. He's known for his magic systems. That's kind of his like, trademark. He comes up with these, intricate magic systems, and part of the fun of his works is like having that, fleshed out and like, oh, how does this, what are all the ramifications of this kind of magic? This is the 4th book in the series, Rhythm of War. There are 5 currently and 5 in the first arc of the series, and there's going to be another second arc in the series of another 5 books at some point. So I'm going to at least get through this first arc, read this one and the 5th one, Wind and Truth, and then, maybe we'll see down the road. It's sort of hard to explain what this is about, but this takes place in a world where magic and technology are powered by stormlight, this energy that comes from these continent-spanning storms that periodically, ravage the world. And, the world design is very much in response to these storms that always go from east to west. And there's big global conflicts between humans and this other race called the Parshendi, and gods and all kinds of stuff in this series. It's cool stuff, in spite of the the fact that I don't really love the prose, and I think he could use some more editing. The next series I have here for you is Patrick Rothfuss's Kingkiller Chronicle, which is a big, popular series, which also gets a lot of heat for its author, Patrick Rothfuss, because, the 3rd book in this trilogy has been, coming for many years, similar to, with the next Song of Ice and Fire book and with the next Gentleman Bastards book, both books that I'm very much waiting for. This is pretty different from the last 2 entries in that it's much like, less on the magic and a bit less on the world building, and it really just focuses a lot on the prose itself, which is wonderful. Ursula K. Le Guin has a quote on the back of the first book, I think, where she said that there's like music in his words, and that very much is true. He's a wonderful, wonderful writer. This is the 2nd book in that trilogy, The Wise Man's Fear, which is, after this one I'll be caught up. Setting aside, there's a couple novellas that are in this world, but I'm not necessarily counting those. This is narratively interesting in that there's a framing story of a barkeep, and his name is Kavoth, I think it's how it's pronounced. But he goes under an assumed name, and we find out, early in the first story that he is, someone of great importance in this world, and you don't know for at least the entirety of the first book, like why he's important, like what he did that, is so well known for, and why he's like kind of hiding from the world. But the bulk of the story is him telling his life story. So like the first, book is mostly him telling about his youth. It's nothing, groundbreaking in terms of like plot or world building or anything like that, but it is just like really well executed. The next book that I have here on my list is Men at Arms by Terry Pratchett, from his Discworld larger series of books and the smaller series within that of the City Watch, I believe it's called. Terry Pratchett writes comedic fantasy that all takes place, or mostly takes place, in his world called Discworld, which is a disc that sits on the back of on an elephant, or some elephants that stand on a turtle's back, or something goofy like that. It's really fun and satirical, and the humor is very British, which it's very dry, and I like that. There's about 40 Discworld books in total, and I'm not necessarily planning on reading all of those, but I am planning on reading all of this sub series called like the City Watch books. This series is about guards in the capital city of Discworld called Ankh-Morpork, a ragtag band of like kind of not great cops, I guess, sort of, and trying to like get whipped into shape and being a proper policing unit. Like I said, there's a lot of satire in here, and he usually uses the fantasy elements to kind of reinforce that satire and to make points about our world. I like this. I like these books. I don't love them, and that's mostly because I don't feel like I can really like get that emotionally invested in something that is as light and comedic as this is. That's just a personal thing. I don't necessarily think it's like lesser than any of these other series for that reason. It's just my taste. This is the second book in this series, and I think there's like 8 total, so who knows when I'll wrap this one up. But yeah, this is something I like to keep in my back pocket, so to speak, for when I want something light and fun. Next is another series within a series, and that's the Farseer trilogy from Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings series, and the second book in the trilogy here is called Royal Assassin. I read the first one, Assassin's Apprentice, earlier this year, and really enjoyed it. Maybe not quite as much as a lot of other people seem to be enjoying this. It's kind of having a moment, it seems like, on BookTube, and in the world of fantasy, people are kind of rediscovering the series that started being published originally in the 90s. There's 14 books total in the larger Realm of the Elderlings series. I mean, 16. Yeah, there's 4 trilogies, and 1 tetralogy. This is exceptionally well written, relatively light on the magic elements, which I love. Magic stuff, it can get in the way for me depending on how it's handled, and this is light on that. It gets compared to A Song in Ice of Ice and Fire quite a bit, and I can see the comparisons to some degree, that it's definitely more character focused and less magic focused, and also has some really heavy emotional, gut-wrenching stuff going on, and apparently that like really ramps up and and starts to come into play quite a bit in this book. This series follows the life of a royal bastard by the name of Fitz, who finds a place in the court of the family of whom he is a bastard of. Did I say? I don't know if that is a sentence. But yeah, he finds a place as an assassin. I also really like the threat that is presented in and is starting to kind of ramp up in the first book of the series. It's almost sort of like a horror thing, and I thought it was really cool. Like I said, particularly looking forward to getting to this one, because people do say that like Assassin's Apprentice is good, but this is where it really starts to hit its stride. All right, number 6, 2 more. This one I got here is Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea cycle, and this is the first book in that series, The Wizard of Earthsea. I don't have the next one, The Tombs of Atuan, though I want to get it, and really that book and like what the plot of it and what it seems to be about is the thing that is primarily keeping me wanting to read these books, because while this was pretty good, and Ursula K. Le Guin's writing is great, I didn't super love it, and it is sort of middle grade, geared toward toward younger audiences, and also is from the 60s. So I is not, nothing groundbreaking here in terms of the fantasy elements or anything like that. This takes place in a world called Earthsea, which is like just a giant, archipelago, just islands scattered. A young boy named Ged discovers that he has magical abilities and goes off to magic school. Sound familiar? Uh, yeah, I mean, this wasn't well-trod territory at the time it came out. Obviously, it is now well-trod territory, obviously, because of Harry Potter, if nothing else. I did think this had a really good, kind of main conflict and resolution of that conflict, and it said something about the human condition. Ursula K. Le Guin is kind of uniquely skilled at kind of expressing these themes, and I got the same impression when I was reading her sci-fi novel The Left Hand of Darkness, which I also didn't super love, but I also thought had great themes, and she was great at communicating those themes. Yeah, there's only 5 books in this Earthsea cycle, and they're all pretty short, I think. So maybe I'll keep going after the Tombs of Atuan, which I definitely do plan on reading. But we'll see. We'll see what it's like at that point. And finally, the last series on this list, and the one that I am actually most hopeful about in terms of becoming a favorite classic fantasy series, which is not actually maybe even technically a fantasy series, but you can judge for yourself. And the series is Stephen King's Dark Tower. I read the first 2 books in the series back to back earlier this year, and I actually did a review on the channel of both of them. You can go find that if you like. This is, maybe less strictly speaking a fantasy series than the other ones in here, although there is, magic, and there's, a separate self-contained world that may be our world in the future or something, or we're not actually totally sure. The series follows the journey of Roland Deschain, who is known as the last gunslinger, which seem to be sort of knights in this world, but who are gunslingers, and his journey to the Dark Tower, whatever that is. Neither we nor Roland really seem to know what the Dark Tower is or why he is searching for it, and that's one of the things that is really appealing to me about this series. It's so suffused or infused with mystery and a sense of mysticism. It actually kind of reminds me of Lost in that way, or at least in the way that Lost made me feel when I was originally watching it for the first time and being like, there's some deep mystery here that we're kind of being given a glimpse into. The first book in the series, The Gunslinger, had probably the most beautiful prose that I've ever that I've ever heard from Stephen King. He's usually very, prosaic and good, but not, anything to write home about. But it was just so good and atmospheric and mystical. The prose itself. Very little actually happens in that first book, and other people don't love it for that reason. I thought it was great, but just as a word of warning, it sort of ramps up, like the action sort of ramps up in the second book, the Drawing of the Three. This is the third one that I'm holding here, The Wastelands, which I have heard is not the best in the series, but I don't know. I never necessarily line up with people's generally widely held opinions on book stuff, so who knows. More than any other reason, I'm including this book on this list because it feels like an epic quest that you usually only get in fantasy. There is magic, and there's crossing between worlds and that kind of thing, but the structure of it as being this kind of epic quest is the thing that makes me think of it as a fantasy series, and it's great stuff. And there it be. There are the books, all of the 7 fantasy series that I'm currently in the middle of and am planning to complete or catch up with. Let me know in the comments which of these books you've read. Presumably some of you have read some of them, since they're all fairly well known fantasy series, fairly or super well-known fantasy series. Also, let me know, what fantasy series you're reading or that you particularly love. I would love to hear about those. And as always, thank you so much for visiting the Rybrary. I love you all dearly, and you may now talk.